All right, nerd ballers, welcome to the second ever iteration of Nerding Out with Nic Bodiford. I'm your host, Nic Bodiford, joined for the second time with Mr. Clark Barnes. Clark, how are you?
Doing great, Nick. How are you?
Good. So today we're covering the AFC East division, but we're going to start things off with just a sort of emergency 5-minute breakdown of what we think of the Los Angeles Rams backfield at this time. Obviously, everyone's heard the news. Cam Akers ruptured his Achilles earlier this week. At this point, it's mostly speculation as to what's going to happen. There was a good piece from Jordan Rodriguez who indicated that the Rams don't have any plans to sign another back to the roster, at least up and through until the start of the season. I don't know what I think of that. Darrell Henderson is the guy in-house who should be expected to take over as the number one, and I think that he likely will do that. But given that the team chose to trade up to get Cam Akers last year when they had Henderson on the roster from the year before, I don't think that Henderson is going to be billed for the same workload that at least I was expecting Akers to get, which is like full-time bell cow status. I think he's going to be the lead rusher, and I think he could hit like 250 touches total. But he's 205 pounds, and he did have trouble adjusting to the Los Angeles Rams rushing scheme from his Memphis scheme in college. So I think like high-end flex is probably the smart way to think of him. I don't know, Clark, what are you thinking of Henderson?
So I think he's fine. I think when given the opportunity, the Rams were not really pleased with them being their lead back. You nailed it. Traded up for Akers. Keep in mind, traded up for Akers to draft him in the second and didn't have a first-round pick. And so that's not monumental to me, but it was their first pick. And when you spend the highest draft asset you have on something, I do think that indicates you really wanted to upgrade there. So I think whether it's someone to start or take significant snaps, they're going to sign someone. Like they need to. If you are counting on a player to have 65, 70, 80% of your touches at any position and they get hurt, you have to bring in another body. Now, whether or not that's going to matter for fantasy, I don't know. There's some interesting names out there. Le'Veon Bell looked okay last year. It would have been nice for him not to shoot himself in the foot leaving Kansas City, but there's going to be something like that. The Rams have been very aggressive. So I tweeted out, if I'm Sean McVay, I'm totally nonchalantly inviting John Gruden out for wings to totally not talk about Josh Jacobs. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that happen. Like Kareem Hunt, you got to call and kick the tires on that, right? I would just be very surprised if they don't do something like that. Henderson is fine. He is a quality athlete. He's good, but he's not a plus athlete. And we've seen with McVay and the Rams, when you have that a la Todd Gurley, boy, that offense can do some really amazing things. So I just think we don't know. If you tell me they're not signing anyone and Darrell Henderson is going into week one as your starter, he's in Mike Davis territory. He's a starter that I'm not really excited about. But if I'm, going RB0 or something, and then it's the 6th, 7th round and he's there, I'm pretty excited to at least have a starter who's going to get 60, 65% of the snaps probably.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, the team, they're obviously going to score some points there. If anyone is a quasi-believer in Matthew Stafford paired with McVay, there's going to be a lot of red zone rushing attempts for the team. Give me your thoughts on these four names. So 2 guys from the roster, Xavier Jones and Jake Funk, Duke Johnson, and Adrian Peterson. Any of those guys, is there one that you would prefer enters the season as the number 2 back?
I don't know enough about him other than, love Duke Johnson. And he went to Houston and I think was tremendously miscast and is just unfortunately having an unfortunate end to his career. But I don't know enough about the other guys to give a really good answer.
Yeah, I saw Adrian Peterson floated out there, and that was like,
Peterson is like Gore in that he's good. Like you watch him play and he goes where he should. And that's hard. A lot of young backs, and a lot of backs never get there. They run into the back of the lineman. They don't run where the play is supposed to go. But I think Frank Gore and Adrian Peterson are that, like, if you block it for 3, they'll get you 3.5. Whereas, like, in the past with Adrian Peterson, if you block it for 3, he might take it 93 yards. He just doesn't have that anymore, but he's still serviceable. He's still good enough to sap value from someone who we want to get more touches. And he's still good enough for it to be a good NFL move for a team to pick him up. So I think he'll get signed this year.
Okay. Yeah. The common theme with the backs that they have behind Darrell Henderson. So Funk is 205. Raymond Calais is 188. So I think he's like, maybe special teamer. And then Xavier Jones is 212. So they do not have much beef in their backfield right now. Akers, I think he was a little bit, 217. So I would not be surprised. It's interesting because I think that Henderson's workload this year was going to be way more along the lines of pure change of pace rusher. Like they didn't have him do much of anything in the passing game last year. That was Malcolm Brown. And then Akers kind of took that role from Brown when Brown got hurt in the playoffs. So it's like, is Henderson just going to start catching passes? Because if they add a pass catcher, then their biggest boy is, he's 212. Like, and we don't even know. Anyway, a lot of speculation. I think Henderson is going to be the lead guy here, and he's totally worthwhile as a flex option who will finish as an RB2 from time to time. If you're in a crazy deep format, I think throwing a dart on, like, I've said this before, but like Duke Johnson, maybe, like 26th round. Why not? But I think it'll be tough for a number 2 to really be fantasy relevant. All right, so moving on to the reason that everybody came here. The AFC East, starting things off with the Buffalo Bills. Some super cool stuff that I got to learn about this team while breaking these guys down. So I did this standalone piece to work on the Bills' main receivers because there's so much confusion as to who's going to do what. And I also got to learn that Sean McDermott was a safety at the College of William and Mary when Brian Dable was there, was a volunteer assistant in like 1997. And that's how these two dudes met. And like Dable has coached with or coached under Belichick and Nick Saban, and McDermott may have ended up being like the most important person he ever met because McDermott hired him to be his OC like right away. Anyway, thought that was really cool. But
yeah, good little life lesson. You should be doing this anyway, but just be nice to people. Just because 1, that's a good way to be. And then 2, it may pay off for you later.
So, all right, first things first, the Bills schedule is really similar to what it was last year. It's like middle of the road opposing offenses and opposing defenses. So they're not going to have game scripts pushed really one way or another. They're just going to get to do what they want, and what they want to do, as evidenced by their results from last season, is to throw the ball 64% of the time on first half early downs. I mean, they were second in the league only to Kansas City in that department. So we know this pass catching group is going to be chock full of fantasy points. Is there any reason not to take Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs at their current ADP?
No, even though I don't really like them there. Okay. I'm not going to talk anyone out of it.
Okay.
Around Stephon Diggs, there's still too many running backs that I really love around there, like CEH and DeAndre Hopkins. But, I mean, Diggs showed last year, on top of already having a pretty good career, he's wide receiver 1. He could threaten the wide receiver overall. Number 1, Josh Allen learning how to pass really helped Josh Allen's fantasy value. That team was clicking, and it wasn't a whole bunch of super deep fluky plays. I mean, you go back and watch the tape, they just look like a really well-run team running a good offense. So I won't talk anybody out of what is Allen is 312, which is, early for a QB, but you're getting like a floor barring injury, like QB5, QB7 kind of deal. That's worth it. Yeah. And then Stephon Diggs, I mean, a floor wide receiver 8. I mean, so yeah, those are good picks.
Yeah. I think it was Ian Hartitz who was talking about Josh Allen's red zone rushing ability. He's had like like 7, 8, and 7 rushing TDs in the last 3 years. And he's like 10th on the list overall for rushing touchdowns during that time period behind 9 running backs, which is pretty remarkable. And yeah, Diggs, I mean, I have Diggs as the wide receiver 1 right now. The reason that I bounced him behind or ahead of Tyreek Hill is just Hill, he carries some off-field concerns. He's done so many things. Some of them have been recorded and still never got punished, but he's done so many things that I feel like at some point we're at risk of him doing something that he's not going to, the league's going to have to do something about. I also don't, I think that Diggs has a chance to just finish ahead of Hill, even if they both play 16 games. For me, I'm a little bit more pessimistic on the Green Bay situation. So Adams is a ways down the ranks for me. So yeah, I've got Diggs as the number 1 wide receiver, and I would be really pumped to get him at the beginning of the second round. I took him there in our mock draft that we did on MFL a little while ago. It was the Super Flex League. Took Josh Allen, my first pick at I think 105, and then hit up Diggs after that.
Yeah, just a little bit of touchdown luck, and Stephon Diggs is the wide receiver 1.
Yeah. Okay, so on nerdballff.com, you guys can find my piece, Cole Beasley, Gabe Davis, or Emmanuel Sanders, where I broke down basically the 3 receivers behind Stephon Diggs to try to figure out which guy is going to be worth what. Joe Biscaglia at the beginning of July put out this piece where he broke down the Bills receiver usage, and he landed on this idea that Beasley is going to be the full-time slot receiver like he has been, and then Emmanuel Sanders is going to replace John Brown. This didn't make any sense to me because what Biscaglia did, that is a tough last name, is he broke down all of the routes that all of these receivers run, including Gabriel Davis, and found that Sanders runs the same routes as Stephon Diggs and John Brown did last year. But somehow this led to his conclusion that he was going to run the routes that Cole Beasley ran, or excuse me, that he ran the same routes as Diggs and Beasley, but did not run the same routes as John Brown. But then he thinks that he's going to take over the downfield Z receiver role. That didn't make any sense to me because Gabe Davis is the guy who ran the same routes as John Brown, and he produced whenever John Brown was out. And both he and John Brown led the team last year in average intended air yards. So from my analysis, the 3 receiver set is going to be Stephon Diggs as the X, Gabe Davis as the downfield receiver in the Z role, and Cole Beasley as that like outrageously productive full-time slot receiver. I think that with the 17-game season, Beasley is getting a little bit older. Diggs is a bit of an undersized player. I think that Sanders is an excellent depth signing, and he seems like a perfect guy to routinely cycle in as the primary backup for both Diggs and Beasley. I would be interested in drafting all of these guys at their ADP, but yeah, for me, it's like Beasley is the high floor guy who the team schemes up when they see slot corner deficiencies to just be like the focal point of the offense. And then, I mean, as you said, Allen, his success last year was not entirely about these like big fluky downfield throws, but he does have a cannon, and I want to be attached to that cannon. So for me, I'm taking Gabe Davis every time at ADP, and I'm feeling good about it. How about you?
I really don't like any of these guys as someone who I'm going to start and feel comfortable about, because Stephon Diggs dominates so much that he's obviously, you're going to draft him, put him in every week. And then they kind of spread out the load. I went back and looked at the game logs for these guys, and they're just bouncing around all over the place. Cole Beasley is the wide receiver too. He is trusted. I looked at something like, I didn't write it down, but it's something like Stephon Diggs got like 50% of his throws for first down, and so did Cole Beasley, right? So like Cole Beasley is a target that Josh Allen feels comfortable going to in tough games and in tough situations. So as far as like who's important to Josh Allen, Cole Beasley, I think, is number 2. Guessing who's going to get those touches each week to choose to start, that's really tough. And I bet on Cole Beasley more often than not. Gabe Davis is the like, I'm fishing off the waiver wire and I just got no other option. And he could have 4 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he could have 2 catches for 15 yards also. I think Emmanuel Sanders is still good. I know that we differentiate a little bit on our feelings about Sanders. And so I think Sanders is going to be the why, even though I think wide receiver is really becoming positionless unless you just happen to have, if you have Julio Jones, he plays the, oh, that's not even true. Julio Jones ran a ton of routes out of the slot last year. These guys just really aren't playing those traditional roles anymore. But you want Diggs, and then I'm just not interested in anyone else really other than just bye-week fill-in, because they're all pretty good. And Josh Allen does a good job of distributing the ball. And I'm just not confident I'm going to be able to guess right on who the number 2 wide receiver is often enough to really start him.
That's fair. That's fair. I think for me, their early down passing rate is like, I feel okay with Beasley as a flex at worst, honestly, depending on the build. Like, you can put him in as wide receiver 2 or 3, and Davis is just, to me, a good weekly flex.
And you nailed it. At their cost, I think these are really good ideas. These are guys that are worth drafting. I have other folks that I'd rather take a shot on. Like, I hope you don't kick me off the podcast, but like, I'd rather have Nelson Aguilar than anyone not named Stephon Diggs. And it's not because I think Nelson Aguilar is so great. It's just I think he's obviously the number 1 wide receiver, so I'll have a better chance of harvesting those points when I decide to start him over someone else.
Okay. Yeah. So, and just for the listeners, like, all 3 of those receivers are going in the 12th round or later of half-point PPR league. So it's like, if you want them, you can get them. Okay, so moving on.
And really good offense, 4,500 yards last year. I mean, that's like, there's value.
Oh, yeah.
In the auxiliary receivers.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so diving back into the Biscaglia piece one more time, he did, I thought, do a great job of breaking down the running back situation, where he talked about how the team tried to trade up to select Zach Moss in the third round of last year's draft. They ended up, or maybe into the second, but they tried to trade up. They weren't able to, but they took him in the 3rd round anyway. He was still available there. They didn't think he'd be there. This is a year after they spent a 3rd round pick on Devin Singletary. We've talked about both on the Fake Teams podcast from back in the day and the NerdBall Fantasy Football Show about how teams really don't like to have to spend the same round pick on a position again. It's usually like, oh God, we missed. So, but they don't want to keep doing that. Last year, from what Biscaglia was looking at, was when the 2 backs were healthy, when Zach Moss and Devin Singletary were healthy, Moss was the clear leader, but Singletary, he might have even had better overall counting stats than Moss, because Moss had a couple different injuries. He had a toe issue, and then I can't remember, he had another one. I think it might have been soft tissue, but the guy was a rookie. It was the COVID preseason, right? Like, anyone entering the league last year had a really tough time, and like any amount of success was really impressive. So Moss is a guy who I'm getting more and more excited to target as a flex play that can kind of blow up into running back 2 value. His one thing, of course, is that Josh Allen's going to steal a lot of goal line rushes. And so there may be some weeks when Moss is kind of neutered and is just like a rusher between the 20s. But I think overall it's a team that's going to score a lot of points. So drafted a guy in the 7th round. Right now he's sandwiched between James Conner and A.J. Dillon. And going ahead of him, of those 2 are David Johnson and Leonard Fournette. Like, for me, I will take Zach Moss ahead of all 4 of those guys, like, every day of the week. Where are you at on the Bills backfield?
So I think Moss is better, and I think that he's a little bit bigger, but I don't think that he's good enough. I don't think he's, oh goodness, this sentence is giving me a hard time. He's not so much better that I think he's going to end up dominating like 80-20, 70-30. I think he's good enough, if both guys stay healthy, to go like 65-35, or at least that's how I'd want to do it. Because you just watch him, and Zach Moss looks like he's got a little bit more an NFL rusher. Singletary looks a little bit more like a really good contributor to your team, but not quite an RB1. You said it. He's at 7'10". If you need a running back right there, then Zach Moss is a great shot to take. There's a lot of wide receivers in that area that I think I'd rather lean towards, but you never know how the draft is going to come at you. And so Moss and James Conner, probably those last backs that could end up as super middle of the road RB2s that you're getting way, way late. Because we're not all going to end up with rosters where we have three top 10 running backs. We think that we're going to, but we're not. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so moving on to the Miami Dolphins, whose strength of schedule really is bringing me some optimism on Tua Tagovailoa this season. Basically, they're slated to face a bunch of good offenses, both in terms of run and pass efficiency. It's always kind of skewed. They're on the harder end of moderate, so they're like the 17th softest, so to speak. So they're competent offenses that are going to be able to push the pace on them, but they're expected to face, this per sharpfootballstats.com, the fourth softest slate of pass defenses in terms of pass defense efficiency. So I know you're high on Tua. Just take it away here and tell me what you think of what Tua can do this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was watching different games than people who are on Twitter saying Tua's not good, talking about, are the Dolphins going to draft a quarterback at 3 or whatever they had before they traded to the Dolphins. I think Tua's pretty good, and I think he looked pretty good last year. He did not look perfect. He did not look amazing. He didn't hit the floor running like Lamar Jackson did when he came in. I think people remember being pissed off that Tua got the start over fun Ryan Fitzpatrick, but Tua went 6-3 in games that he started, right? The Dolphins are a good team. And we've talked about this for younger quarterbacks. I feel like it's better for them to be on good teams because they're not going to be expected to do everything. Being down by 30 worked out great for the old Jaguars quarterback, whose name is escaping me.
Are you talking about Bortles or Minshew?
Bortles.
Okay.
Blake Bortles, right? Like, so there's some value to being down 30 all of the time, but I think in general it's going to be better for you to be in competitive games. Tua can run. He's coming off a huge hip injury that is like, if you read about his hip injury, people compare it to, Bo Jackson, and then there's like some maybes, not because it's the same injury, but because it's so rare for that hip injury to occur. He said himself he didn't feel right last year. With ACLs, we've heard players say, I was able to run and I was able to cut, but I didn't feel confident until the second year back. I think that we're going to see something like that. Watching Tua play, I'm not, an expert quarterback whisperer, but it looked like he was going through progressions, and it looked like oftentimes when he was being blitzed that he knew where he should have gone with the ball and threw it there, and a lot of time was successful, and sometimes they dropped it. So he showed all of the things that I want to see from a good young quarterback, and people are talking about him like he's Josh Rosen, like he came in and just looked horrible after the team drafted a wide receiver, number 7 or something, Jaylen Waddle, signed Will Fuller, already had Devontae Parker and Preston Williams. Yes. Like, I feel like Tua is going to be fantastic, and he's the quarterback 24. If you're going to wait on quarterback, you draft Tua and Ben Roethlisberger, and you're, take your chances with that.
Yeah. I think in terms of pairing, I think Harnet's mentioned Kirk Cousins as a good guy to pair, or Baker Mayfield. I love the idea of like one of those two guys plus Tua or Trey Lance. So looking at what they did last year, though, I really like this. In the weeks that Tua was the starter, so that's week 7 through 16, but minus week 11.
Like minus a half. Yeah.
Yeah. Miami was throwing the ball at the 10th highest rate on first half early downs, which is so cool. There's a school of thought that suggests that what teams should do is establish the run early on for a quarterback, a young quarterback who's trying to learn how to play the position, but like have a guy throw against base run defenses. That is the easiest time for a young player to learn how to throw, right? So I really like that. Even though they were starting a rookie, they were still having him like run their offense. I thought that was really cool. And for those concerned that like starting a quarterback too early can break them, so to speak, I think what the Dolphins did, where like when a game would get out of hand, they just bench him and bring in Fitz and not like mentally rattle him. I thought that was really smart. I like that a lot. Another component of the passing game. So Myles Gaskin, his ADP is like, it's a little high for my taste. I think he's like a 4th round pick. Yeah. So he's 404. If they didn't have this schedule, I would probably be off of him, but like he's a passing game specialist who is going to be the lead back in the offense. He's very small, and he missed like 4 games with a grade 2 MCL sprain last year. given the fact that I think they're going to have to throw a lot, I'm cool with it. But like, he's not my favorite 4th round pick.
Yeah. So I use Fantasy Football Calculator for ADP. We do that on the site a lot. When you filter it by running back and you look at where he is, you're like, oh, slam dunk, Myles Gaskin. Because he is slight. But when he started last year, he played 60-70% of the snaps in every game. So it's not as though he was playing, half the game, even with Jordan Howard at the beginning of the year when we thought, young team, run the ball, establish the run early. No, he was playing, I think 63% was about the lowest snap share that he had when healthy.
Okay.
So they play him. And he has the skill set that we want. He is smaller, but he can catch. He's good. He seems to run where he's supposed to, and he's young. It's exciting. They didn't really draft anybody to replace him. What Jared Dokes is that? Or no, is that Atlanta?
So Dokes is on the team, but I think
both 7th round picks, right? So I'm excited about it. And then on Fantasy Football Calculator, I hit the show all positions button. Well, unfortunately, Myles Gaskin is sitting down there with Mike Evans and CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just not going to draft him because if those are my options, well, I'm going to take Mike Evans. But just as a player, and if things break right and he sticks around a little longer than he should, I'm super high on his fantasy prospects this year.
Yeah. That ADP might be a little more acceptable for full point PPR. The thing with Dokes, the dude is big and he's a very strong athlete, like freaky athlete. And they might have just, I don't know if they were telling us with the Howard role that they want a big banger to just like rumble into the end zone. Cause you look at Howard's box worth for like the first 4 or 5 weeks, 1-digit yards and 1 touchdown, which is just hysterical. Dokes could get in there and steal touches from him. I don't know. We'll have to see, but I do think Dokes is a good like dart throw, especially in Dynasty. Okay. So when it comes to the top dog in the passing game though, last year in Houston, Will Fuller showed us he can actually operate as a full-time X receiver, not just the like one-trick pony who runs downfield. He's going to be duking it out with Devontae Parker. Which one of these guys do you prefer? Are you taking both of them? Who's going to win the job?
Yeah, this is tough. When Will Fuller is the guy who is healthy in the comparison, that there's some concerns. I think Will Fuller is a little bit better than Devontae Parker, just from what we saw him, as the one in Houston, granted with Deshaun Watson. So it's not like he went out there and put up these numbers with like Jared Goff or something. So he had a good quarterback, but Will Fuller played fine as the X. I think we're going to have a situation that I talked about earlier. Who is the X? I don't think it's going to matter. I think they're going to move people around all the time. Parker and Fuller are both really good wide receivers, so it's good for the team that they're there. I'm drafting Will Fuller everywhere. So that's been my decision.
Yeah, looking at ADP, I think that this might be just a trio that would be cool for stacks. So if you're looking to create like a late round stack, Will Fuller's going off the board in the 8th, or just at the very end of last pick of the 8th round. Devontae Parker's coming off the board in the 11th. So like add those 2 guys plus Tua. It's kind of like a can't miss to me. On to the next group. Jaylen Waddle versus Mike Gasicki. I know this might sound strange to people, but Gasicki basically operated as a slot receiver last year. His slot snap count was like 5th highest in the league. I think we were talking about this the other day. It's crazy. Like he didn't really play inline tight end ever. He just lined up as a slot receiver, sometimes went out to the perimeter. I think that Waddle is going to be the like majority slot guy this year, but I don't know. I could see outcomes where both of them are somewhat successful. I think I would throw the dart on Gasicki instead of Waddle. But what are your thoughts on these 2 guys? Am I wrong to think that they're going to duke it out for targets?
Well, I don't know. I think it's more likely that the veteran Gasicki, who seems like he's improved every year, operates in a field where Tua likes to throw the ball. He's got a lot of the timing and an anticipation to his game. So I think Gasicki this year, it's the obvious pick, especially with the dearth of talent at tight end that we're interested in. You've got your top 3, and then you have a dozen other guys that could finish as the wide receiver or tight end 4, tight end 5. And I think Gasicki is in there, and he's a part of my plan at tight end this year. I'm really excited about Waddle long term. But every year I have to just sit in a dark room with myself for a little while and remind myself rookie wide receivers do not generally put up consistent fantasy numbers. It doesn't mean that they don't, because we saw Justin Jefferson just absolutely light it up last year, but no one was drafting him like that. And it is the exception rather than the rule. Very excited for Waddle and Dynasty. And if I can pick Waddle up super late in a keeper league that has, penalties for keeping, like you draft him in the 12th, you can keep him in the 10th next year. Well, then I might draft Waddle and hold on to him for a little while. But as far as banking on the production week to week, you're going to have to choose to start him. I see it really easy for myself to talk myself into starting Gasicki as my tight end. I don't know when I'm going to throw Waddle in over someone like even like Jameson Crowder or something. Like, it's hard to be a pro in the NFL. Expecting a lot out of these guys in their first year that's tough.
Any hope for Preston Williams? It's contract year.
I mean, when Williams plays, he looks really good. He's just had such a hard time with injury.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's kind of going undrafted in a lot of formats. So like final round pick, I don't think that it's not a bad use of your last draft pick. New England Patriots. So they spent the offseason making huge splashes in free agency, which is totally atypical. Belichick, I think, was pissed at the performance that they had in 2020. They seem to be building a bully. Okay, they spent a bunch of money on tight ends, a couple of receivers. They brought Trent Brown back, I think, from the Raiders. They're going to want to try to control the clock, and they're getting a bunch of defenders back who opted out for due to COVID last year. I think that they're going to try to play like a ground and pound game that hopefully they'll throw. I don't know. Best scenario is that they try to do something like Tennessee last year or the Browns last year, where they throw play action a lot early, but then just pound the rock. So that at least there's some sort of analytical framework for when they're throwing and running. They're going to face a bunch of bad defenses, but their offenses, they're expected to face the strongest slate of passing offenses in the league this year. So that clock control scheme could get cast aside if the team that they're playing, which is going to have a very good chance of scoring early, scores early. Do you have any thoughts, on how they want to play and what this means for the quarterback position?
Yeah, this is my favorite type of fantasy prognostication. We have almost no idea what's going to happen. There have been so many changes. What we saw last year with Josh McDaniels working with Cam made me angry. I really love watching football, and I'm passionate about doing this show and talking about it, but I don't usually really I don't care what the Bills do. I'm not even a fan of the Texans anymore. But I got so mad watching Cam Newton play wing back and just running into the back of the line, not even sending the wide receivers out as though they're in a route to maybe give a safety some pause. I just thought that was the most uninspired, meatheadish, I should choose my words carefully here. I know that Cam Newton can run, but that doesn't mean that he can't play quarterback as well. And that just made me really, really mad. This year they went out, obviously realized Jacoby Myers is not a wide receiver one. And the other guys on the team, I don't know, name them. Pete's not on the podcast. And Gil Harry is doing everything he can to get off the team. They went out and got some pass catchers. I think they are going to play two tight end, single back with Cam. And I think Jacoby Myers and Nelson Aguilar, really exciting. Not Debo Samuel.
Kendrick
Bourne. I think he's exciting as a third or fourth wide receiver option on your team. And Cam has a really nice deep ball. Aguilar looked good with Carr throwing in the ball last year. I am super excited about what this team can be. And best of all, everyone's free. No one has a high ADP. So I'm picking up Cam everywhere. If he doesn't start, screw it. I'll move on to another quarterback. Nelson Aguilar is going in the 14th round. He doesn't pop off. No problem. I've got other options. Damian Harris, I think, is the most expensive thing on the team. What is he? 7th round? Something like that. So I'm super excited about the Patriots this year. I think that Cam's going to bounce back and be very serviceable for fantasy, but very good in football terms. I love what they did. Everyone else is going small. They're going to run 2 tight end power football. Like this is super exciting for me. It's going to be another interesting year for the Patriots.
So I think that Mac Jones has a chance to take this job. But here's the thing. I'm going to jump ahead on the schedule a little bit here. Even if Mac Jones wins the starting job over Cam Newton, I don't think that means that I don't think that means that Cam Newton is not going to see the field. And so what I want to jump to really quickly is the running back group. Damian Harris, like you said, I mean, I think he might be the most expensive guy. He's also the guy who's likely to lead this backfield this year. If Mac Jones is the quarterback, then okay, great. We can think about James White and full point PPR. But the biggest hindrance to touchdowns from a rushing perspective is Cam Newton. Is Damian Harris, is he worth this ADP? So I'm going to double check it right now. I don't have it in front of me, but
606 half point PPR.
Okay. Jeez. Okay. So 6th round, Damian Harris. This guy, I mean, he could score a lot if it's Mac Jones and they cut Cam, but if Cam's on the roster, would you at all be surprised if you see on a weekly basis, they get inside the 10 and Belichick sends Cam Newton out there to just burrow his way into the end zone?
No, I don't. As much as I talked about how meatheady it was to have Cam just running as a running back.
Yeah.
I would like to use the caveat, except when it's like inside the 5-yard line, because then it's very smart.
I agree. And so like I'm really wishy-washy on what I'm thinking here. And it's worth noting Romandre Stevenson went on, I think, the PUP list or non-football injury list. So there's, their rookie rusher that they selected. He's no longer going to be a guy that Harris has to duel with. It's basically versus Sony Michel and his like degenerative knee. So I think Harris probably has that lead rusher job, and
Harris is good, man. Like he runs super hard. He is not a small guy. You mentioned the only reason not to get excited about him is a running back who gets 8 touchdowns is so much different than a running back who gets 4.
Yes, drastically.
And not getting those easy punch it in, pass interference in the end zone. I mean, those are going to go to Cam like they used to go to Tom, oddly enough.
Yeah. Okay, so flipping back to the passing game, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry were both signed this year. Jonnu Smith, I think, got like the highest contract ever or something. Belichick has talked about Jonnu Smith's run after catch ability. He's called it the best at the position in the NFL for a couple of years now. He's raved about Hunter Henry. You see him, the photos after they play. He's on the sideline afterwards, like hugging Hunter Henry. And it always seemed like these two unions were always going to come to fruition. Playing 12 personnel or 2 tight end sets is likely for this offense, but hitting like 30% is a high rate. So it's not going to be what they run the majority of the time. The NFL just doesn't really deploy 2 tight ends as a majority base set. With Smith being the more likely like pure pass catcher guy and Hunter Henry being the dual threat tight end, a blocker, so I guess a threat to his own fantasy totals. As well as like obviously a phenomenal receiver. Do we want to go after one of these guys? They both have extensive injury histories too. Do we want to go after one of these guys? I think it's Jonnu Smith is going in the 10th round and half point, and Hunter Henry's in the 11th. Is it stupid to draft both of them? What do you think?
No, because of the cost. And I think I don't know how to bet on this. Can we do wheel bets on this show, or is that just for the main show? I think the Patriots, reasonable health assumptions will run 2 or more tight ends for the majority of their or more than any other formation. I know the NFL doesn't do it very often, but I think that's what they're gearing up to do. Cool. As far as which one to take, I don't know. Both of these guys have shown us so much and then fought injury. I mean, Hunter Henry looked amazing and just can't stay healthy. Jonnu Smith, I mean, like, I feel odd even saying this, but like Delaney Walker-esque athleticism.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so good. Why wouldn't you try to get them both out there? Because then who else? Who are you making room for? Jacoby Myers or and N'Keal Harry? And I'm not trying to be insulting to Jacoby Myers, but like if that's the choice, well, let's put another big dude out there and make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let's spin that. Yeah, I think Henry might so Henry's cheaper and he's the guy who's got the full-time role. So like maybe he's the preferable one, but I do like them both. I think we've kind of answered this already. Nelson Aguilar versus Jacoby Myers. I think it's Aguilar for both of us, and I don't think it's close.
Yeah, if you take one thing away from this podcast, draft Nelson Aguilar in the 11th round. Like he is the number one wide receiver on that team. It may not amount to much, but it doesn't cost anything either. People are really sleeping on that.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the New York Jets, who have a very nice slate of opposing run defenses. I did a little bit of digging and did 4-year averages of first half early down passing distributions via the tools on sharpfootballstats.com for the San Francisco 49ers, who both head coach Robert Saleh, who was in DC, and offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur, who was like passing game coordinator or whatever in SF. They threw to running backs, I think it was 26% of the time on first half early downs of their first half early down pass attempts, which was like third in the league. So they're going to be run heavy. And when they do throw the ball in early downs, they're going to get their running backs involved in the passing game. And I realize actually, so I'll dial it back here. So how does that affect the receiving core for you? Is Corey Davis, does this hurt him? Do you care about the schedule for Corey Davis? He's the ex receiver. What do you think of Corey Davis?
Each year there's just teams that you want to get a piece of, and so you just kind of close your eyes and say that's the guy I'm going to take. I have zero interest in the Jets. They have a lot of interesting names, and we can talk about it. I'm not saying that there's no value there, but I just don't, at their draft position in redraft, there are no Jets that appeal to me other than maybe like Tevin Coleman in the 15th round, just because he may get the preferential veteran starting gig as a running back, and any starting running back has value. I just have no idea what to think about this coaching staff. I'm not high on, Zack Wilson. I've heard comparisons to Baker Mayfield, which isn't insulting, but it is not, this person's going to elevate this team in year one. There's so many moving pieces that I can tell a story where it's exciting and they're turning it around, but I just, for redraft, almost no interest.
Okay, that's fair. I personally am happy to take Corey Davis in the 11th round in half-point PPR. He's the number one receiver on the team. He appeared to turn his career around last season. He posted the sixth highest yards per route run in the NFL at 2.58. Which destroyed his previous career best 1.83. It's a stat that's somewhat indicative of personal performance. Targets are earned and all that. At the end of the day, 11th round pick, not really going to complain about it.
But yeah, first round pick, coveted first round pick. People, me and lots of other people, have been excited about Corey Davis for several years and finally gave up on him last year. So there's a story where, and the Jets went out and paid him, right? So all of the pieces are there for him to be, especially as the 11th round, 10th round, to be a successful pick for you.
Okay. There's a battle going on for the wide receiver 2, 3, 4 spots. The once coveted mighty Denzel Mims has really fallen out of favor with this coaching staff who did not draft him. Joe Douglas, the GM, did draft him, but the guys who are coaching the players on the field, they've got no connection to Mims. You think about, he's just like a big athletic jump ball guy. The scheme they just came from has Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. He's not the most natural guy to be taking these like short passes to the house. So we have Elijah Moore, Jameson Crowder, and Keelan Cole. Jamison Crowder was asked to take a 50% pay cut, and Crowder, full-time slot receiver for the team for a few years now. He did take that pay cut. So he's there, but they drafted Elijah Moore early. It was like an early second round, who was like only a slot receiver in college who did do some dirty work downfield. So there's a possibility, and I recommend everybody goes and checks out Hayden Wink's piece on this group on the underblog of Underdog DFS. Moore, I think, is duking it out with Crowder and Keelan Cole for snaps, both at slot and at Z. The fact that they kept Crowder, to me, tells me he's going to take his snaps. He's going to play, and we know where he's lining up. He is not a guy who gets moved around all of the formation. Crowder's a slot receiver, end of story. Keelan Cole, journeyman, he's played a bunch of different roles, none too successful, but evidently he's had a decent camp.
Has flashed and looked good in spurts, but
that's fair.
Really had injury problems.
So I think Moore is going to take over as I think he's going to be a full-time player here. Do you think he has enough fantasy potential to be a weekly flex starting, I don't know, week 3 or 4, while he's battling Crowder and Keelan Cole for spots? And if not, what do you think of Crowder and Cole?
If I had to pick a wide receiver, if you said you're starting someone week 5 from the Jets, I would pick Jameson Crowder, just because I think he's the best and shown the most as a pro. And so I don't know why that's not going to continue. I'm trying to get Elijah Moore in every kind of keeper league and dynasty league that I'm in, because I'm so excited for what it could be. But as a rookie on this team, it's not going to be very good. I just don't have much hope. I think Keelan Cole will start off as the Y, and I think they're going to let Mims just run down the field and be the X. So it's going to be interesting to see how they work him in. Hopefully they work him in like San Francisco works people in, has worked in Deebo Samuel and things like that. They just get these guys on the field and just try to get him touches in non-traditional ways, which I'm not generally a fan of, but when you're starting a rookie quarterback who's not super polished, it's not a bad idea.
Okay, so I think, Clark, we may have lost. Did you lose video for me? Because I'm looking at a frozen face.
Your face is frozen, but I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I hear all that. I think I'm Crowder's probably not the guy that I'm going to be interested in, starting week in that weird scenario, so to speak, in week 5. But yeah, I think it's more for me. And then, like I said, Denzel Mims, he's just in the doghouse. We're not interested in Chris Herndon again this year, are we?
No, I mean, no impugnation of Herndon's talent, just no.
Yeah, agreed on that front. Zack Wilson last year was second on his team at BYU in rushing touchdowns. I know you just said that he's not the comparison to Baker Mayfield. He's not a talent elevator. Do you see his dual threat ability, the ability to pass, the ability to run? Does he draw anything for you? Is he someone you want to take a shot on late?
No. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa is the QB 24. So if everyone in your 12-man league drafts 2 quarterbacks, your floor is Tua, and Roethlisberger's behind that. I don't see the obviously dynasty, sure, but no interest in Zack Wilson.
Okay. Moving on to the final group that I think is going to get a ton of work this year, the running backs. Tevin Coleman is the expected starter, but Michael Carter has a drastically higher ADP than Coleman. Carter is going at the end of the 8th round, while Tevin Coleman is going at the end of the 11th round. I don't think that Coleman can stay on the field. He's had issues with sickle cell that leads to, I think, easier or puts him at an elevated injury risk, and he's been banged up for years now. He was a very capable back at one point in time, but I think that Carter and Ty Johnson are the guys to invest in here. I think Josh Adams might still be on that roster, but for me, Carter in the right situation could totally take him as a flex play. I think he's going to be a prominent pass catching back. I don't know how much rushing work he'll get, but I wouldn't be surprised if he takes over as the lead at some point. To the Ty Johnson point, the dude is a decently athletic third-year running back. I think he's got a lot in the tank. And if this coaching duo is able to implement some of the Shanahanian run game principles, I think that he could be a nice late round pick. Where are you on this backfield?
I'm going to be taking some shots on it. Like you said, just the cost of Coleman. I'm not expecting to get a lot of return on it, but I've taken the shot a few times. The super interesting thing here is Ty Johnson looked really good towards the end of the year. And it's one of those deals where, did you look good in a couple of games because you didn't have time to get hurt, or because you just finally got your chance and looked good? That said, that's all that's keeping Michael Carter off the field. Not a giant guy, but runs pretty tough and good receiver and a Matt Waldman favorite, which means that he is one of my favorites. So Carter is one of those rookies that does have a sneaky good chance of getting a ton of playing time because there's just nothing in front of him. And so, I'm taking some shots on Carter, expecting I think the ceiling would be something like a Nyheim Hines plus type rookie season where maybe like 800-900 all-purpose yards, like 5-6 touchdowns if he gets incredibly lucky with touchdown luck. But that would be a good portend of things to come for his career if he could do that. And I mean, God, he looks really good and polished at North Carolina. So hopefully he'll be able to come to the Jets and, put the competition to bed pretty early.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to name a couple guys that are going behind Carter in the 8th and early 9th round. Will Fuller and Trey Sermon and Michael Pittman. Are you taking Carter over any of those three?
No.
Me neither.
He's going that. Oof, that's high.
Yeah. He looks good, but he's in it's similar to Gaskin. He's in a tough area. And with that, we have concluded the AFC East. I had a blast. Thank you so much for joining me again, Clark.
Yeah, thanks, man. I love it.
All right, guys. Tune in next week, NerdBallers, for Nerding Out with Nic Bodiford. Talk to you later.